And welcome back to another episode of Tribal Council Chat. As always, we are your hosts. I'm Bruce Heller,
And I'm Brett Parnell.
and let's get started. So, episode 7 of Survivor 45.
Yeah. Um, Interesting episode. I liked, and we'll get into this, but first reaction, they took some of the things we've seen from the new era, but threw an extra twist on there, and it was fun.
Yeah, and the first thing I have on my notes on here is that this felt like a very Kellie heavy episode,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that. I actually really like that because she's been one of my favorites this season, like next to Sifu. So I liked seeing her. I think it was a really good episode for her. And I didn't know it was going to be a double boot. So that was a fun little surprise.
It was a great episode for Kelly, especially like we see her right from the beginning having so many different options. And you can tell that we haven't seen, say, Kelly this season as much as I thought we might have based on the pregame, but now you can see she's starting to come out as a merge player into
Yeah.
the front of the show with really, I don't think anybody dislikes her, and a lot of people want to work with her.
Yeah. And especially with someone that I thought was the front runner to win, going home as the second of tonight's double boot. Kellie really, to me, feels like one of the front runners. So
Yeah.
with that, let's go into player of the week. Who is your choice?
Like we said, I think I have to go with Kelly this week.
Yeah, and this is the second week in a row we've had the same player of the week. But I mean, to me, what sticks out is her whole little group of six she was a part of was wanting Bruce to go home, and we'll get into him in a second because it was also a very Bruce heavy episode.
Yeah.
And she realizes, hey, even though I don't want to work with this guy, he trusts me and wants to work with me. He can be a number for me and convinces Kendra, who is one of the leaders of wanting him gone, to put that aside and work with him for one vote, basically so Kellie got what was best for her. So
Yeah.
great move for her. Unfortunately, that meant my guy Sifu going home, which I wasn't thrilled about, but
Yeah.
great move for her.
Sifu was such a fun character.
I know, I'm so sad, and I'm upset that he's not on the jury, but we'll get into that later. That was not a twist I was happy to hear.
No. In fact, it was funny because I wrote down in on the top of my notes as soon as Jeff got into that, I'm like, you and I named last week's episode Earn the Jury so props, and all the production just felt like playing a trick on this podcast.
Yeah. And so let's dive into the recap. Where do you want to start at?
Let's start right after Tribal, and at really all the talk seems to be around Bruce.
Yeah. And so we have Kaleb seems to be taking it well. First off, that like he
Yeah.
got all the votes. He's in good spirits about it, considering what just happened. And then
I
we
mean,
have
how can you not be? It's one thing to be shocked if you got a couple more votes than you expected. It's other thing when the whole tribe votes against you. It's like, what, you're gonna take it out on everybody?
yeah. And so and we see more of Katura and Bruce. And I've been on this show saying that like Katura and Bruce feels very one-sided, but in like not really understanding her the way they're editing her. But I get why she was upset this time. That he came right up to her in front of the Rebas and said, "Yeah, I know you were hesitant on this vote, but," and like kind of makes her look bad in front of other people that they're not working with. But I mean, he's just kind of doing his own thing. I don't really get what he's doing anymore.
That's true. You have anything you want to add?
Not maybe. Yeah. I mean, do you have anything you want to add on the whole post-tribal scene and Katura and Bruce?
Really, just that, like we were saying, Katura seems to be hesitant to vote for Kaleb and kind of play to cards, which was interesting
Yeah. And I
to
don't
the
mind
rest of
him.
the group. Like we even see Emily, Caleb's closest ally, know right away I have to vote for him because I want to be here tomorrow. In contrast, Katura is still from day one so desperate to get rid of Bruce but can't find a way to do it.
Yeah. And one thing I don't really mind him asking her about her being hesitant to vote Kaleb. The thing I understand where Katura is coming from is that he asked her in front of the Rebas that they're not working with. And as Kaleb must have been nearby because he walks right up to this group during that conversation. And like, I don't know. This whole season, I felt like Katura's beef against Bruce was very weird and one sided. But this episode really kind of made at least me understand where she's coming from. This was not a good episode for Bruce, in my opinion.
Oh, not at all.
And
Then you never know at this point of the game too. Maybe he's starting to get wind of it from the other tribe members. People like say, uh, Kellie or Jake, and therefore start to need to come at her the other way.
yeah, and something else I noted down is be that Kendra notices Bruce asking Katura this question the way he did. And she's kind of seeing that as a red flag and second guessing whether she can work with him or not anymore, too. So, I mean, it feels like, because, with 44, it ended up being a war between Ratu and Soka, I believe. And it's kind of, with Lulu being the way they were, it's kind of felt like a Bello versus Reba war is coming. But Bello's not going to be able to stay together, I don't think. I mean, maybe if they all kind of seem to be on board with not liking Bruce. So if they can maybe vote him out, then Bello can stay together. But there's too many cracks here right now that I don't know have a ton of faith in Bello right now.
Agreed.
And so the next thing I have in my notes is Austin didn't vote last week. I didn't catch that. That was
I did.
You did?
Yeah. That he
Okay.
mentioned that he wanted to improve his idol. So now Austin has a full idol going
Yeah. I
all the way to
wasn't
Final Five, which we've seen how powerful that can be.
I wasn't shocked by it, but I just if they showed it that little voting confessional thing last week, I missed it. Just
Yeah.
so I thought maybe it was one of those things like they did in 41 where they don't show Nasir finding his idol, then they go back and show it in hindsight. But that was a fun little surprise.
Yeah. Once again, at that point, though, repeat that in my mind, it's kind of the inherent flaw with the end of the game is that if idols are good to Final Five, it's exactly why forced fire making doesn't work. Because essentially now, if Austin can get himself to five, he's in a fire making challenge to go to Final Three.
Yeah. And see, we should do an episode about controversial twists sometime, kind of like On Fire did with season 1. And I realize I reference On Fire a lot on this show, but that's pretty much the only place you get to hear Probst explain answers to stuff that people have. So that's kind of a big source of information. But
Great thing that Probst has started recently.
yeah, I've enjoyed that show. But last season they did an episode on controversial twists, and his thinking behind forced fire making, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but I kind of get it now, is look at 43, for example. If Final Four goes to a vote, Jesse's doomed, for example.
Yeah.
Like, there's no chance that guy's getting past a vote in a big threat and a front runner like that. Whereas, yes, Jesse going up against Gabler in Fire was a blowout, but you theoretically have a shot. You have
Oh
26 or
yeah.
39 days to practice making Fire. In a way, it gives the people that are playing more aggressive front running games a chance, I guess. I still wish it was still just a vote, but I get where they're coming from.
And I guess that leads me to my other point of if they're gonna do that, and that's production's choice, they're entitled to do so, then why not make idols end at 6?
Yeah, I would be on board with that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So the next thing I have is a really funny scene of Bruce and Sifu just doing random football moves on the beach together, which is kind of funny. And then we have Katura seeing that and her Bruce. I don't think Bruce can do anything and it not annoy Katura at this point. Because, like, she's getting annoyed by, like, Bruce and Sifu doing football moves for some reason. Which, again, this was a bad episode for Bruce. It really kind of makes you understand where Katura is coming from. But, and so, before we get into Bruce and Caleb, and because that in their conversation, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's about where I am right now.
Okay, so let's get into this then, because Bruce and Caleb sit down and have this conversation on the beach. And it's kind of the first time they've talked to each other since Bruce was really rallying the troops against Caleb. And what were your thoughts on this conversation?
Absolutely great moment of the episode. You're certainly thinking at this point, based on last week, based on what we've seen so far, that clearly both of them are sort of at the bottom in some way, and one of them is probably going to go home. I started wondering if maybe there was going to be more to this story when Probe said that it was a double elimination, because then I'm like, what about both of them? Maybe this
It
would be
almost was
crazy.
both of them.
Yeah, literally. But no, it's a great conversation, and just to see those two players that are clearly at this point struggling in the game, but are also just starting the episode and gonna keep going.
And what I have written down was about this conversation and them sitting on the beach talking 101 is this, at least in this scene, Bruce felt a lot like the dad that he came in saying he didn't want to be.
True.
Because it's a lot of him, like, even in his confessional saying, yeah, Caleb needed to get humbled a little bit. Like, he's just this father that knows everything. And I don't know if he got off to a really strong start. He was the Funkle on Bellow Tribe, and he's drifting further and further away from that. And I just don't know if he realizes that or not.
Yeah, don't think he does. It's probably one of those things that you can make a pregame strategy, but if it's not you, it's going to be really hard to actually put into practice without looking totally ingenuine.
Yeah, and we see him basically act like the father in this conversation and tell Caleb everything he's doing wrong in a
Yeah.
way. And we see Caleb come out of that having no interest in working with Bruce anymore. So,
Right.
and it's funny, just now you mentioned that both of them are kind of struggling in the game. And my first thought was the difference is Caleb knows he's struggling at this point after just
Yeah.
receiving all those votes and knows he needs to tone it down a little bit. I don't think Bruce has the self awareness to realize that the position he's in and that he's causing everyone's opinions on him to sour at once, basically.
Still seems he's everybody's number one.
Yeah. And he's, and I have written down here all along, we thought Katura's beef with him was one sided and weird. now we're seeing, after seeing Kaleb and we see Kendra later in this episode, we're starting to see Katurah is not really alone anymore. And so I think Bruce is in a lot of trouble the next couple episodes, unless he has plenty of time to turn it around, and we'll see if he kind of gains some self-awareness. But
Oh yeah.
and then an interesting note I have is we see him we've seen him tell Kellie she's his number one. We've kind of wondered if that was real or if that was game. Now we see him say it in a confessional also, which there's no reason to lie or try to game play in a confessional. None of the other players are seeing those. So
Exactly.
we know he truly views her as his number one, but it pretty much feels certain that the feeling is not mutual. But
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out because we see that from Bruce. But like we said, now we're seeing Kellie kind of come out of her shell and be a little more visible on camera. And I'm looking forward to seeing who she thinks her number one is.
and that's what I have written down is because like for most of the season so far, it was pretty clear her and Brando were each other's number one.
Yeah.
Without him
And Brando's gone.
Without him, who is her number one at this point? And at least for this episode, it felt like it was Kendra, but we'll see if that sticks or not.
Yeah.
I think it'll stick for a little while, but I don't know if they'll take that to the end.
Right.
And then the last note I have written down before the challenge is Kellie's having trouble giving Bruce advice. Like we see her trying to give him advice and trying to help him, and he's just not seeing what she's seeing, and not again, Bruce is really starting to lack self-awareness.
Exactly. Bruce is better at giving other people advice in his mind than taking it himself.
Yeah. And did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we get into the
I'm ready
challenge?
to get into the challenge because this was quite the challenge.
And we see a Survivor Classic return. It's Get a Grip. They're on the polls. And I say return. We just saw it in Winners at War season 40. But before that, it had been a while. And Winners at War was kind of a weird one for challenges because they brought back a lot of the classic challenges that they haven't used in seasons upon seasons before or since. So, but, and I will give them production credit. A lot of people, myself included, have been wanting to see variety in the challenges because I started watching at 36, and since then, with the exception of 40, every challenge is in an obstacle course followed by a puzzle at the end, just different puzzles. And so we've been getting more variety in challenges.
And O'Connell Carson, the same puzzles.
Yeah, and we've been getting that. We've been not only getting classic challenges brought back, like Get a Grip here, 43 and 44 brought back Last Gasp, but we're starting to get a little better. It could be a lot better than it is, but they're starting to improve challenge variety a little bit. So good job, production, on that.
Agreed.
So we see.
The interesting thing here, I thought, is we kind of mixed the two. We brought back this classic challenge, but at the same time, we've added this new era concept of a split tribal and 2 eliminations on the same day all into that. So it was kind of like a challenge we grew up seeing way back from like Vanuatu, mixed with this new voting concept, and one player can earn you a reward. And then we even throw a brand new twist into it where rather than doing this at like 8 or 10 like it normally is, we're doing it at 12, and someone won't get on the jury for the fact that the team lost. So we're seeing 2 tribals tonight, but only 1 juror.
Yeah, and I will make a quick note. I would not call the split tribal double boot and new era concept, that goes back a little ways. We've been at least since 20, maybe before. I think they had a double boot episode in 11, but yeah, and
Yeah, there's been double boot episodes. I mean, like the actual structure of the tribe splitting into two and trying to own a road, and that's kind of been a regular
yeah,
occurrence since 41.
yeah, since 41 it's been regular, but we've seen it. That's how the Tyson James episode worked in 20, I think. But nonetheless, it's been a lot more common in the new era, and the one player can earn you a reward is new. And yeah, like you said, Probe said, the person voted out from the first group will not make the jury. And I immediately wrote down, I did not like that. I think that's stupid. Why do we need to do that? It just kind of feels gimmicky. But
Didn't like it that way, but at the same time, like that post I sent you online, I see the rationale behind it.
yeah, if their rationale is avoid a 9-person jury with a final 3 to avoid a 3-3-3 deadlock. I mean, I get it, but I hate it for Seafood that the the guy doesn't get his dream of sitting on the jury, even though I mean we've been having the merge boot, their definition of the merge boot, even, which if you ask me, the merge was last week because they were all on one beach together and they weren't separate tribes. But going by their definition of merge and merge boot, and that person still doesn't make the jury, I don't know. I hate it for Sifu. I wish he got to be on the jury. He would have been a really entertaining juror for like watching tribal council reactions, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, and maybe this is just me. Anytime we saw a zoom in on the poles, I feel like the foot slots are shallower than they have been in the past.
Agreed.
So that's another fun way to put a new spin on a really old classic challenge.
They definitely seem to be, because whereas before you would see like players using those foot slots, if we look at the two winners, Kellie and D, they were just wrapping themselves around the pole and not letting go.
Yeah.
And this challenge only lasted what, 17, 18 minutes, whereas we've seen like Parvati do that for a couple of hours.
Yeah, the Parvati Danielle one in Heroes versus Villains never was going to end, I don't think. But so we see Kellie win immunity for the blue team and D win immunity for the red one. And then we just have both of these girls just go complete boss mode, dueling each other out on this for a while, which was really cool to see.
It was. I almost wondered, could they be foreshadowing a big challenge later in the season between those two, maybe on finale night?
Yeah, or those two get to the final 3 and they're the ones fighting for votes. Because normally with final 3s, there's kind of a third person that gets less of the votes than the other two. But, and I have this written down. D does outlast Kellie after a really cool battle. And I have it written down. That big toe from a few episodes came in handy. We got a whole episode of D talking about her toes helping her balance and her toe being big, and that actually came back to be helpful. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I wonder if that was a random discussion back then was included in the episode just for this purpose.
They have to have thrown that discussion in knowing this was going to happen, because they go back and edit it after they finish filming, don't they? They're not editing it as episodes as they're going.
No, not at all.
Okay, so yeah, that has to be on purpose. There's no way that was just an accident. And so what do you have notes wise from this challenge?
From this challenge, we mentioned D and Kellie, obviously.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was that Kellie's team for say. It's not really even a tribe anymore because they're merged, but basically all dropped out, and that she was able to outlast like 4 members on the red team.
Yeah, and she like didn't even move at all, like start slipping till it was just her and D, and the two of them just went boss mode trying to outlast each other. So
Also, like, I found it interesting that at first you can almost tell when it is just Kellie that she's like, I'm not sure if I can do it. But then one of the reasons that I put her as my player of the week, even though she didn't win, is that she just kept battling to try to get her whole team on the jury. And I mean, who doesn't want to win tacos in Fiji? That would be amazing.
yeah, for sure. And a trip to the sanctuary, which I have a note on later. But yeah, this was a really fun challenge. I hope we start doing this again. I assume they will. They brought Last Gasp back, and they're bringing this one back. So I hope they keep bringing back more and more of these classic challenges. What this question just popped into my head before we keep going. If they keep this trend going, what's a challenge that you would want to see come back the most?
Oh. I'm gonna give you two. One I think is realistic, that'll be first. One I think's totally not realistic in this era, but I mentioned before I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
Um, realistic one, some sort of question and answer challenge.
yeah, I was gonna say that. I love those, especially when it's like guess the most common answer within your tribe. Those are always really revealing.
That would be good too.
And though thinking about just makes me laugh because of the one in Micronesia where like one the thing was once your rope got chopped, the big axe comes down and hits your mask. And it just looks so violent and it took Amanda by surprise, and that always makes me laugh. And
Yeah.
then the cutting of the ropes part of those challenges always kind of adds an interesting dynamic and possible drama, can show you who's working together or not.
I always thought, yes, it's a challenge that was broken, but like when we look at it in, say, Amazon, I don't think the challenge was as much broken in San Juan del Sur as much as it's just a better immunity challenge than it is a reward challenge.
Yeah, and I think the one in San Juan del Sur was broken because not so much because of the challenge, but because of the people that were playing the challenge. Like,
I mean, with it being a reward challenge, that alliance knew, oh yeah, we're all gonna win and take each other. If it's an immunity challenge, there's one winner and everybody else is vulnerable. So I don't care which alliance you're part of or whether you trust Natalie or not.
yeah, was that the one they gave? Never mind. I was gonna ask if that was the one where she took Jacqueline to try to build trust, but Missy won that.
Nancy.
Missy was given the win. So on that, I was thinking of the wrong one. But with the question
Missy's
and
who I meant to say, not Natalie. My bad.
with Miss, the other thing that comes to my mind before we get to your unreasonable one you want to see with the question and answers is I also think of Panama when poor Courtney Merritt is just getting crapped on the whole time with all the answers to everything, and she basically didn't see any of it coming.
Yeah.
But we digress. We've got 10 minutes left. What's your unreasonable challenge before we get into the reward and tribal?
Unreasonable challenge. I mean, I was hoping still it would have happened in Winners at War, but if rather than the falling balls on the track, we could have settled Natalie Anderson, Michelle, um, Sarah, and Tony in the Hands on Hard Idol challenge way back from old school.
Oh, that would have been cool. Okay, so moving forward, I'm glad you mentioned question and answer. That and Last Gasp are my two favorite challenges. But so the reward and the first note I have is the sanctuary is cool and I like it, but the same way I used to complain about wanting variety and challenges, I'm starting to want variety and rewards. Like I feel like every reward is just a different type of food in the sanctuary at this point.
Yeah,
Like you don't have it anymore. You don't have the ones anymore where like I've been rewatching Edge of Extinction and they had one on the last episode I watched where it's Chinese takeout is waiting for you back at camp.
And it's not a difficult fix to make either.
No, it's just always, I don't know, it's probably a money thing. It's cheaper for them to do rewards at the same place every time. But I'm kind of bored with the sanctuary. But I had a moment at the reward where I'm really impressed by Julie's read on the game because Julie's afraid that Kaleb could find another life and that could be at her expense, which seems weird. Nobody said anything about Julie yet until the very next scene is Jake saying, yeah, we can use Kaleb to weaken D by taking Julie out, and says the thing that Julie had just said. Great read on the game by Julie there. And so we also realize before we get into tribal, Drew left his bag back at camp, which means he can't use his safety without power advantage.
Interesting.
And all I could think
didn't
of
notice
was
that.
all I could think of was JT in Game Changers, leaving his idol in his bag at camp the night he got voted out.
Yeah.
So before we dive into tribal, do you have anything between the challenge and the tribals?
Yeah.
Okay,
We
so
have 2 votes in a few minutes. So.
yeah. So you take it away. Where do you want to go with at these tribals?
I was shocked. I thought Bruce was going to play the idol.
I did too. And I was surprised he didn't. And like we said,
He must know more than we got the impression he does.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because, like we said, Kellie was able to kind of bridge that gap and get him and Kendra to play nice with each other. So he probably knew the 3 of them had the votes. See who's going, and then we'll go from there.
And then with the other one, really my initial main reaction was that I think Kaleb just a big part of why he ended up leaving after he played the shot in the dark perfectly was just that he was already targeted for being such a big threat, and that last week he saved himself. He didn't go home, but he made himself even more of a threat.
Yeah. And my thing with this group that I noted was, and this wasn't necessarily from Tribal, is that D got off to a great start in the game. I don't necessarily love this episode for her. Because, like earlier, we see Austin go to her and be like, hey, you're starting to pick up steam. You could use Kaleb as a shield, possibly. And then in the confessional, we see she just never even considers it, shuts it down immediately, has tunnel vision on getting Kaleb, and it's a very short-sighted game. And also, we see Jake kind of complain a little bit about her telling him how to vote. So I think, like, I don't love the way Dee's playing, but she won immunity.
Really good game so far, but I'm almost seeing her in like that Shanna Carla role that she could start to become targeted very soon.
Yeah, well, and even with Shan, we saw Deshaun start to get tired of being told what to do all the time and being bossed around. And I think Dee can recover it, but I didn't love that impression from this episode. And as far as Kaleb going home, I think Katura's playing with her emotions. That Kaleb wanted to work with you, and you got upset that nobody told you about Bruce's idol until now, so you're going to take revenge because you're upset. But voting Kaleb out doesn't help Katura's game any. So real quick, a line blindside first boot. Who you got?
All right. First of all, shout out this week. Pretty exciting moment for our podcast.
Yep.
We had a legendary player, Jerry Matthew, follow us.
Oh, I can't. I'm so excited about that. That's so awesome.
So my aligned blindside first boot is going to be Villainesses.
Oh, nice.
For you. So your options are obviously Jerry Matthew, Australian Outback, Danielle Di Lorenzo, Panama, or Cass McEwen, Cagayan.
Okay, so if if we had only seen Jerry her first season, I would have voted her out first just because I don't think we would have worked together well. But seeing how she evolved over time, and that in Heroes versus Villains, she was kind of a more mature, more likable player. I'm not gonna first boot her. I think I am gonna first boot Cass just because she's just kind of chaos and unpredictable, and I love watching Cass on television. I don't think I'd love trying to play with her. I'll blindside Jerry because if she gets to the end, she is gonna be hard to beat. Which leaves me aligning with Danielle, who look at Heroes versus Villains and Panama. She clearly knows how to get deep in the game, but I think I can probably beat her in a jury vote for whatever reason.
With you on all three.
And so mine, and this required me doing some research at 1:30 in the morning right after I finished the episode, is players that went home in double boot episodes. And there was a lot of me searching, trying to figure out what seasons had those. So you have Brian Corridan, James Clement, and Tori Meehan.
Excellent picks. I am going to align with Tori. I think I could possibly beat her at the end. She clearly knows the game. Unfortunately for her, got a bad shake in 42 that she couldn't do anything about. But
Yeah.
also, I do think she's a very good player that could help you
Yeah.
go far. I'm going to blindside Brian. We missed out on such a student of the game being on the jury. Would have loved to see that. I know he's still a big Survivor fan. He's still very active in the New York community and would be great to play again. And that leaves me to blindside James. Oh, sorry, first boot James. Kind of a wild card here. He can help you in challenges, but I mean, he might get hurt again. So
Yeah. And I will say, Tori got a really bad deal with what happened that episode in 44 that she couldn't do anything about. From what I remember, she was kind of rubbing some people the wrong way before that too, though.
she
So,
was.
like, she might have eventually been in trouble anyway. But I agree with
She
your
would have
pick.
been in trouble right around the same time, but she's a
And
very good player.
I love James, but he's unpredictable and honestly wasn't near as likable his last season as he was his first two seasons. And then if he destroys his leg again or does whatever injury happened to him on micro, then yeah, you're in trouble. But I agree with your picks on that one. So
Excellent.
subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Have a great week, guys.
Good. Right.